Today on the Bar Business Podcast, discover how to build a forward-looking budget that breaks revenue into categories so you can stop flying blind. Learn how to set percentages based on targets for COGS, labor, and operating expenses that flex with real sales. And master how to set your profit first in your budget so you don't have to keep hoping to survive on what's left at the end of the month. Hello and welcome to the Bar Business Podcast, where we help bar owners increase profits, attract loyal guests, and simplify operations so you can avoid burnout and finally enjoy your life outside of your bar. I'm your host, Chris Schneider, the Bar Business Coach. The Bar Business Podcast is brought to you by QuickSpec. And full disclosure, I'm a co-founder. We built QuickSpec to give you back your time and help you work smarter, not harder. QuickSpec connects your POS data, layers in real-world context, and gives you actionable forecasts and KPI dashboards that allow you to make data-driven decisions so you can spend less time guessing and more time on what matters. Staff smarter, order better. Stop planning for rushes that never show up or getting caught off guard by the ones that do. When you make decisions based upon real data, not guesswork, you get your time back and your team runs smoothly. Check it out at quickspec.com. That's QUIXSPEC.com. And make sure to sign up for our early access program on the homepage. So today we're going to talk all about budgeting. And I know we've talked about budgeting before, but I want to dive into it again because, as we talked about earlier this week, things are not getting easier in this business. And having a structured budget is the best way to protect yourself as an owner from the ups and downs we're seeing right now. And budgets, I think, get a bad rap because we look at them as corporate. We look at them as limiting. But they're not really a corporate thing. It's something that everyone should do. I mean, I think most of us understand that even for our home, most of us have a budget. We know what we're spending on rent or our mortgage. We know what we have to spend on groceries. We know what we're saving so that we can go on a vacation. The idea that you would treat your home life with that sort of budgeting scrutiny and not your business is, quite frankly, kind of silly. And the big thing here is, as a bar owner, we work really, really hard. And often our sales look fine, but our cash never accumulates because we're spending it in a reactive manner. We're using our bank balances to determine what we have to spend. And we're in this constant cycle of wealth or drought, where we either have a lot of cash and we spend it or we have no cash at all. And that's not a way to run a stable business. And quite frankly, doing that adds a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, a lot of trouble into your life. Now, we don't need to be perfect at guessing the future. I'll tell you, because as you guys know, I've been working on this AI project to do forecasting and KPIs and analysis. And quite frankly, guessing the future in this business is really, really hard. Even if we take all the potential variables into account, even if we use very complex formulas, it can be a very, very difficult thing to do. So we're not going to be perfect. But what we do need is a framework that flexes as reality changes and that helps us plan to have the best business possible. So the first thing I want to tackle talking about budgeting is why a lot of bar owners don't do it, why I didn't always do it when I had a bar, but also why it costs us when we don't. One thing we say is revenue is unpredictable, and guess what? That's a fact. Revenue is somewhat unpredictable. I mean, I don't think any of us would have guessed a month or two ago that gas prices would be where they are today. That's causing food prices to go up, causing all of our product prices to go up. Because I don't know that any of us guessed we'd end up in a war with Iran or a limited action, whatever you want to call what's going on today. But unpredictability is not a reason not to plan. And when we plan properly, we can flex with these moves. And as we get more data, as we get sales, as we understand if inflation is going up or down, or where our costs are going, or whether or not we have more guests coming in the door or fewer, whether or not those guests are spending less or spending more, we can adjust the budget. And I think that's a big thing here. Budgets are not set in stone. We know this industry is unpredictable, so we can flex as we have it, but a budget is going to set a baseline that guides us forward. Now, the other reason people don't budget is because I watch my bank balance. Now, we've talked about bank balance budgeting before. We've talked about spending based upon your bank balance. It's really not good. There are all sorts of reasons for that. One being that your bank balance, if you write checks, I know most of us don't write checks anymore, but if you're still writing checks, There's a float there you're not accounting for. And when you're looking at just your bank balance, all of us have a tendency to say, well, I have all this money so I can spend it. But we need to keep in mind both future expenses and seasonality in our business. For most of us, for almost everyone in this industry, there are times of year when you're going to be really busy and make most of your money, and times of the year where you're going to be really slow and need that reserve to spend. If we can predict those, if we can understand those, we can make better choices, and following our bank balance does not do it. Another thing I hear a lot, well, I tried and I was wrong. Okay. I've been doing this for a living for years, trying to write pro formas, write out budgets, use AI to do forecasting. And guess what? Depending on what you call wrong, I'm always wrong. Again, the point here is not perfection, it's understanding, it's giving you a good planning tool. And perfection is not possible. There's no way you can consider every variable. Every car crash is going to make it harder for people to get to your bar. Every time that food spikes for, I don't know, there's a bird flu, or gas prices go up, or the beef herds are at the lowest level they've been in decades. You cannot predict those things. And even if you can predict them, there's no way as one person you can wrap your mind around all of it. So if you tried it and you were immediately wrong, that's not bad. Being wrong is expected, it's how we react. And again, wrong with a plan is a heck of a lot better than wrong with no plan. So here's the real cost. When you're not budgeting, you're always looking at the past, you're never looking towards the future. By the time you realize you have a problem, it's often too late to solve it. And so budgeting creates decisions that you have to make. It makes you think before you spend money, not after. And if you're serious about profit, you need a plan that forces you to make trade-offs, that forces you to not overspend, because that's how you're going to ensure that you, as the owner, make a profit and have a great life. Because I don't know about you guys, but I had my bad months. And when I was working 50, 60, 70 hours a week for free, it wasn't fun. When I was working 50, 60, 70 hours a week, and then I was pouring in more money to make payroll, it was less than fun, right? I mean, we weren't just at a neutral state. We were at a very negative place at that point. And that really, really pulls on you as an owner. So make sure that you plan ahead, you do those trade-offs, you don't overspend, and the only way to do that is through budgeting. So the first thing when we want to do a budget is we want to look at revenue. Now with revenue, just like we talk about when we talk about how you should do a P&L or forecasting or anything else, we want to break our revenue into categories. Liquor, beer, wine, non-alcoholic drinks, food, potentially even private events, buyouts. If you sell a lot of merchandise, merchandise is something else you can budget. But we want to break out our revenue. Now, why do we want to do that? A, because we're looking for different cost metrics across all those segments of revenue. You know, a lot of times if we're looking at retail, let's be honest, t-shirts and printing are expensive. It's basically people are paying you to advertise when they're wearing your bar t-shirt around. You want to get those out. 50% cost, 60% cost, even 75% cost can make sense there. But if you're running a 50% cost on cocktails, let's be honest, you're not going to be open very long. Probably want that more in the 15 to 25 range, depending on your market, where you are, who you're serving, what type of cocktails you're serving. So we need to make sure that we're breaking out our revenue into categories. Now, oftentimes, if you have an existing establishment and we're doing this, those categories are going to relate directly to your POS revenue categories or your profit and loss revenue categories. Frankly, those should be one and the same. But when we're looking at revenue categories, if you have been open, you can pull a PMix, that's going to give you distributions. You can look back at your P&L, that's going to give you some starting cost percentages. But it's really important that we use categories here. Now, when we project, there are a lot of different ways to forecast. And the easiest one is to look at last year's as a baseline. Assume you'll do what you did last year. Now, if you've seen sales increase greatly year over year, say you have 3 or 4 years of data and you see growth every year, maybe we can assume that for this year. If you see a decline, we definitely want to assume that for this year. But generally speaking, when we do a budget, we want to be flat, maybe moderate growth compared to last year. When I say moderate, I'm talking 1, 2, 3%. We want to adjust for changes that we know after we have that baseline. Now, those changes could be competition, it could be renovations, it could be that you have a new event space. It could be any number of different things that are going to impact your business that you are aware of. So we want to build that into our revenue model a little bit. And the biggest thing here is always make sure you maintain seasonality, right? July is not February. December is most people's best months. February is generally one of the worst, at least in the Northern Hemisphere. So we want to adjust for that. If you can't explain what your categories are, why you think you'll get the revenue out of those categories, and the seasonality within those categories, you cannot manage them. Now, once we have the revenue figured out, now we want to build out the cost side. And again, we want to start with what we know historically. So, generally speaking, as long as you've been open a couple years, look at the last 2 years' average cost percentage for all your revenue categories: liquor, beer, wine, food, non alcoholic beverage, retail, what have you, and figure out what the cost percentage was in the past. If you ran a 22% liquor cost percentage 2 years ago and a 22.5 liquor cost percentage last year, don't assume you're going to run an 18% this year unless you're drastically changing what you're doing or your pricing. And if you drastically change your pricing, maybe your sales is going, your number of guests is going to reduce, and that, guess what, might end up bringing the same revenue. It might not. Maybe it doesn't decrease rather your guests coming in the door at all, and then you can actually increase your revenue or your profits, I should say. But cost is important here, and start with where you have been. Assume that for this year, and then adjust up and down. The same is true of labor. Set your labor as a percentage, look at your historical, and use that for this year. Now, when it comes to labor, make sure you're factoring in all of your labor. A lot of times when we look at something like labor cost in a POS system, it's saying, oh, well, you pay all your bartenders $14 an hour and you pay all your servers $6 an hour, and we add all this together and this is what it is. Well, if you're in the United States, we've definitely forgotten about, I think it's 7.65% in employee taxes that you're paying as the employer. We've forgotten about any benefits, health insurance, if you're offering it, any sort of retirement, any sort of activities you're doing for your employees, employee meals, right? All that kind of comes into your labor and what it costs to employ those folks. So we want to look at that globally and not just, I pay people $10 an hour and that's my cost, because it's not. Oftentimes, if we just add up your hourly labor and your salary as a flat number, your actual cost is going to be somewhere between 20 and 30% more than that baseline number. So we want to make sure we factor that in. It's something I see a lot of people forget, and then they wonder why they're not making money when they missed 20% of their labor costs in their budgeting. Then we need to look at occupancy costs. Now, these are things like rent, utilities, insurance. Now, rent, that's predictable year to year. You know how it goes up and down. If you've rented for a few years, you should know what your CAM is and how that's going to go up and down. CAM is not always predictable precisely, but when you have history, it's not that hard to figure out. Utilities, after a year, you know basically where those sit. Insurance can be difficult, particularly now. We're seeing insurance rates in the industry still continue to climb. I think we're all aware of that. But the thing about insurance is we pay for it once a year, it moves forward. If you talk to your agent when you're doing your budgeting and say your insurance renews every year in June, we're trying to budget now, it's March. So we know that price is going to go up in June, but we don't know what it's going to be. Call your agent up, ask them, say, hey, have you seen an increase in insurance bills this year? What can I anticipate? Now, they won't give you a dollar amount, but they'll probably give you a range, right? They'll say, well, yeah, most of the people we've been renewing that have used your company, we're seeing a 10, 15% increase. Now you have something to budget from. And when someone gives you a range like that on an increase, on a budget, I always take the highest number. So if I'm told I'm going to have a 10 to 15% increase, I'm taking that 15% increase and baking that into my planning. Worst case scenario, it's a little more than that and I underplanned. But more likely than not, because I took the top of that range and my agent is probably conservative and give me the top of a range higher than what he anticipates actually happening, I'm probably going to have a little bit of extra money on the bottom line that I can spend to do whatever I want. Maybe as an owner, that means I get to go on a vacation with my family, or maybe that means I'm pouring it back into my team. Either way, It's a nice surprise, not a bad surprise. Then we want to look at operating expenses, things like supplies, repairs and maintenance, marketing, technology. These are going to be the quiet leaks in our business. Supplies, we can pretty much do on a percentage basis because those tend to flex with revenue. Things like repairs and maintenance, you got to look at what you spent last year, but also look at the age of your equipment. Is there things that you plan to potentially replace? Is that old cooler kind of on its last leg? All of that needs to be factored into your budget. So, on the repairs and maintenance side, you can't just rely on what happened last year. You need to think about what is the condition of my equipment? What is the condition of the things, the different fixtures and equipment that I'm using? What might I have to upgrade and what's the cost associated they're going to be? Technology you need to look at very closely. I think it goes without saying nowadays, many of us have more subscriptions than we realize. And because we have more subscriptions than we realize, we're losing $50 here, $75 there, $100 on tech we're not using. So always scrutinize your tech stack. Make sure everything works with each other, that you're not double paying for two services that are doing the same thing, that you're not underutilizing the services you have, and that your tech stack actually makes sense. Because while it may not seem like a lot, $100 here and $100 there, say $200 a month, that's $2,400 a year. And if you don't have to spend that, generally as an owner, that's going to flow straight to your bottom line and into your pocket. If you don't have cost targets, you're just hoping for a margin that shows up. But when we know our revenue and when we've planned our costs properly, we can have a really good idea on how to make decisions moving forward. Now, prime cost should be visible before your month starts. And what do I mean by that? Prime cost I see kind of as our control panel, right? This is our big top level number. It's one number we can look at that's going to tell us the most about what's going on. Your budget should show your projected prime cost every month before the month begins. Now, guess what? Because our revenue fluctuates on a seasonal basis and our costs fluctuate some, that projection is probably not flat against the whole year, right? If your goal is to run 55% prime cost across the entire year, that means probably some months you're closer to 50 and some months you're closer to 60 or even higher. Always keep in mind that while labor does float with sales in a lot of ways, we can put more people on the floor or less, more people in the kitchen or less. At some point, you have a bartender, a server, and one dude in the kitchen, and you can't go any lower than that. So labor is always going to have a floor. Likewise, it's always going to have a ceiling, and that's going to impact the range in which our prime cost can move. Also, if you think about the last few years, we've had a lot of inflation. That inflation has driven up cost through the year. And so say you change your menu quarterly. So we can have a quarterly price adjustment to the market, but inflation, if it's going up more or less evenly throughout the year, our prime cost is going to fluctuate because before we hit that price increase, our cost is highest, then we increase prices, the cost as a percentage drops way down, and then it floats back up over time. Now, some food and items we've seen actually have some deflationary pressure. You know, beef right now is really high. It's probably going to come down in the future. So maybe beef comes down a little bit. So price stays the same, but cost as a percentage goes down. You need to think about those when you're trying to say, this is my target prime cost for the month. Now, once we have a target, again, things change month to month. Budgets are never going to be perfect. So maybe you target 56% prime cost next month. Maybe when you're looking at it, 2 weeks in, you're running a 57% prime cost. So we're a point over. Can we bring that down? Do we need to order as much going into the end of the month? Maybe, maybe not. But also maybe something structural has changed and that 56 is no longer a reasonable number. Bottom line is we have the target. We can evaluate. We can root cause why we're higher. We can see if we have a way to react to that. But the bottom line here is we should never be surprised by our P&L because if we budget and track our budget through the month, the P&L is just confirmation of information we already know. Now, last thing I'm going to give you for today. Profit first versus profit last. Now, if you're interested in profit first as a system, we had Casey Anton on last year. You can go back and look at her episode of the podcast. She walks through the profit first system. But what I'm talking about here is not necessarily involving that whole profit first system, but creating budgets for a profit. So profit last, we budget expenses and we hope profit is what's left. When we put profit first, we decide our profit margin and then we can build our budget to it. For example, say you're doing $80,000 a month. You want 10% net. That's $8,000. Your total expenses, your cost of goods sold, labor, occupancy costs, fixed costs, your supplies, office expenses, software, all of that together cannot exceed $72,000, right? Because 80 minus 72 is 8. That's 10%. So this redefines how we look at every decision we make from can we afford it, right? Is there enough money in my bank account that I can pay for this? To does it fit within my plan? And when we focus on protecting that profit, we won't always be able to do it. Things happen. Refrigerators break. Prices go up and down. There's construction down the street from you. Things will happen that get in the way of this. But when we plan the profit and then look at our expenses and say, can we afford this? Profit's already built in. So if you don't have a budget, you should make one. If you want help making one, reach out. I love to help people with budget projects. I'm a bit of a nerd like that when it comes to finances. But create a budget for the year. Look at it every month. When you look at it, do it towards the end of the month. Look at, say, how did we do last month? Pull your POS information. Pull your accounting information if it's up to date. Compare your revenue to budget. Compare your cost to budget. Say, okay, last month this happened. Next month we need to do this to be in line with next month's budget. Adjust budgets as needed. Remember, it's not a grade. It's not something fixed in stone. It's not handcuffs, and it's not corporate nonsense. It's a mathematical way to guide your decisions to ensure that you make the profit you want so that you can live the life you want, so that you're fulfilled by your bar, so that you can pour your energy back into it and really build something that helps you, helps your team, and helps your community. That about wraps it up for today. If you enjoyed today's insights, make sure you like, subscribe, and leave a review. If you are ready to take your bar to the next level, schedule a strategy session with me by clicking the link in the show notes below. Until next time, have a great day, and we will talk again later.